I'm Nate,
And I'm Rob.
and this is Rob and Nate Record a Podcast. So we are recording this on the 2nd of January 2020. We're going to discuss a film that each of us saw separately over the last couple days, Rob on New Year's Eve and me on New Year's Day. It is the film Bombshell, which is a movie about the sex scandals at Fox News, specifically about the scandal involving Roger Ailes, founder and longtime head of the network. But as background, you have the O'Reilly sex scandal, some of these other sex scandals, and as a continuing counterpoint throughout the film, the Donald Trump presidential campaign, as this film spans between middle to late 2015 through July of 2016, as Ailes, basically the world collapses around him as his decades and decades of sexual harassment come to light.
Come to a head.
This film is directed by Jay Roach. Jay Roach has kind of an interesting filmography as we looked into this. He did Meet the Parents, Meet the Fockers, as well as all three Austin Powers films. But he's also done a number of politically themed films, including Recount, which was an HBO film about the Florida recount in the 2000 election, and Game Change, which is a film about John McCain's choice of Sarah Palin as running mate in the 2008 campaign, also done for HBO. So there's a lot of similarities here between Mr. Roach and Adam McKay, who did the Hangover films and also did the movies The Big Short and Vice about Dick Cheney. This film is very much in the tradition of those films. You have a lot of talking and explaining directly to the camera. You have like names and stuff that come up onto the screen to tell you this is who this person is. So it kind of, it's a drama, but it has kind of a sense of humor to it. And it has this, what I can only call Saturday Night Live quality. I mean, Kate McKinnon is in the cast, of course, of Saturday Night Live. But there's a real surreal quality to this film. You have these big Hollywood actors playing big Fox News stars and real people. And there's just something kind of surreal about it. I mean, Megyn Kelly is played by Charlize Theron, who looks so much like Megyn Kelly in this film that it's surreal. And she does the voice. The other major cast members include Nicole Kidman as Gretchen Carlson, who of course is a real person, and Margot Robbie plays Kyla Possible, who's a composite, who's used to kind of stand in for all of the different women that Roger Ailes sexually harassed over many decades. Ailes himself is played by John Lithgow, who's like one of the forgotten great actors. You forget about him for long stretches of time, and then he shows up in the film, and you're like, oh my goodness, how good is John Lithgow? And he's under very thick makeup in this, kind of like Christian Bale was in Vice.
Yeah.
But he totally becomes Roger Ailes. This is a film, after I got out of it, I texted you my thoughts. Like, I just got out of Bombshell. This is the most GD surreal thing, one of the most GD surreal things I've ever seen. It just felt surreal.
Yeah, it was kind of strange to watch. Part of me is honestly quite surprised that this got released in the time frame that it did. Part of me assumed Roger Ailes and Megyn Kelly Carlson, the people at Fox News, would have sued this into oblivion to try and prevent its release. I see how you get around it because they're public personas.
Yeah,
and it's going to be referred to as a work of fiction, even though a lot of what's contained in it is factual.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why you have so very little Bill O'Reilly in the film.
Yeah.
So they have a guy who plays Bill O'Reilly. He's under makeup and prosthetics attachments on his face, I assume, because he looks so surreally like Bill O'Reilly. It's uncanny valley territory. But they talk very little about him because Bill O'Reilly is a very litigious person from all reports. And at one point where they talk about the whole falafel incident, they talk about this is true, it's on the internet. So it's like, hey, you can't sue us, Bill. This is public knowledge. Yeah. We're not saying anything we don't already know. Yeah, it's just so surreal. I used to be rather conservative. I used to be a big Fox News person. There was a time period in which I really thought a lot of Bill O'Reilly, which I do not now. I was never a big Hannity guy. You and I have discussed this. Hannity always seemed more of a partisan hack
Yeah.
to me. Bill O'Reilly could kind of set himself apart. In fact, there is a line or two of dialogue where the Kyla character, played by Margot Robbie, has gotten a promotion from working for Gretchen Carlson's daytime show to being on staff for Bill O'Reilly's primetime show, which was the flagship show of the network at the time. And they're having a pitch meeting, and she pitches an idea based on something she heard on Rush Limbaugh. And O'Reilly swats that down instantly. And later on, the character who is played by Kate McKinnon, Jess Carr, is talking to her and giving her advice about how to handle O'Reilly, saying, look, he's always angry. He's a perpetual rage machine. That's why people love him.
Yeah.
But the problem with what you did is you quoted Rush Limbaugh. That's a Hannity story. Bill O'Reilly thinks of himself as above that, so you need to quote something from the Drudge Report, or I think maybe Breitbart was the other source, she said. The guy who plays Hannity is also in it very briefly. They have to do one of those little text next it's like, this is Sean Hannity, because he kind of looks like Sean Hannity, but not so much that you don't kind of need the extra reminder. The guy who plays Chris Wallace, they don't go out of their way to make him look uber like Chris Wallace. Some of the characters don't look a ton like the people that they're playing, but some really do. The actress who plays Kimberly Guilfoyle looks eerily like Kimberly Guilfoyle. There's a lot of actresses that play minor parts as Fox News personalities. Ashley Greene plays Abby Huntsman. Alice Eve plays Ainsley Earhart. They also have Jennifer Morrison playing Juliet Heddy. She has excellent cheekbones, by the way.
Yeah.
Jennifer Morrison does. It's just, I don't know, this is a film that I came out of, and I was just kind of, what the heck was it that I just saw?
I have a quick question for you on a character.
Okay.
Did you happen to realize who was playing Rudy Giuliani?
Rudy Giuliani was Richard Kind.
Yeah. I didn't catch that until just now.
I did catch that. That worked. Of course, Richard Kind was on, what was the Michael J. Fox sitcom about the New York City mayor's office?
Yeah. Which is kind of a funny
which is kind of
that out.
Mm-hmm. And certainly his Giuliani is ridiculous, as Giuliani himself.
And I finally found Bill O'Reilly is played by Kevin Dorff. I was having trouble finding who did Bill O'Reilly.
Mm-hmm. So this is a film that it felt like the previews on this, they'd been showing them for 6+ months. It's a story that, of course, I remember. This film obviously jogged my memory about a lot of the details, but I remember when this was going on. If we're going to talk, we usually talk about this sooner, but your first thoughts about the film, and then I've been kind of rambling here, so some of your thoughts about the film having now seen it.
I agree it was extremely surreal. I feel like it was a good film to have been made. I think it's long-term, it potentially may be a very important film culturally. Kind of curious to see how that part of it plays out, whether it does become important culturally or not. It kind of makes some references at the end. You know, this was the first time this had happened, but it won't be the last.
You're right, because this did happen before even the Kevin Spacey thing happened, which a lot of people kind of consider the inaugural Me Too moment. This predates that.
Yeah, I'm not sure what else to say there, but I really liked the performance of John Lithgow as Roger Ailes. He really did a good job of playing that part.
And he's not just like a maniacal villain. Like he's paranoid, as Roger Ailes was.
Yeah.
And he's over the top in some ways. But they go out of their way to talk about. There's a scene where Megyn Kelly is talking about how, you know, the good things Ailes had done for people's career, how he had kept certain people on payroll even when they were very sick.
Yeah.
That he had done some really good things, and that there were reasons why people were loyal to him. She tells that story about how when Shepard Smith, who'd been closeted as homosexual for a very long time, finally came out, how Roger Ailes supported him.
Yeah.
Which, it's conceivable he might not.
Yeah. I also appreciated the performance of Connie Britton as Beth Ailes, Roger Ailes' wife. That scene where she's sitting next to him in the conference room and his attorney asks everyone else to leave and, says, are you sure you want her to be here? And confronts Roger Ailes saying, this is all true. We know it's all true because there was tapes. and his wife sitting next to him, as they all have to come to terms with all of this is
She
true.
knew. She knew on some
She
level.
probably knew on some level, but it's one of those things where she had to have been denying it for a long time, or willfully ignored it.
One of the interesting thing about Mrs. Ailes is I guess she ran like a newspaper in like New Jersey,
Yeah,
which I think is interesting. She seemed to be more of a traditional conservative, not as grandiose or as paranoid as Ailes was, though she was more than capable of feeding into what he was doing psychologically,
or at least
his
just went
defense
along with it.
mechanisms. Yeah, just went along with it. The casting of Allison Janney as Susan Estrich was pretty great. I don't know if you know Susan Estrich. She's a lawyer. She's got that raspy voice because she's been smoking for freaking ever. She does a great Susan Estrich.
I have to ask one question, and this is probably my only piece of criticism for this entire film. Did you at any point find any of the accents distracting?
What do you mean? What's an example?
I felt like
The Australian accents?
Well, I felt like Nicole Kidman and Charlize Theron's voices were so similar in this. Their accents, their voices became at times almost identical, and that was almost a little distracting.
Well,
they weren't ever on screen at the same time, so
very
it wasn't
seldom,
too bad.
yeah.
But their accents, are
I don't
very
think they ever
similar.
have a scene where they talk, actually, in this whole film, though they are on screen together one or two times.
Yeah, there's a couple times I can think of off the top of my head where they're on the screen together, but I don't believe they ever have any conversations. But I felt like their accents were extremely similar. And Allison Janney's accent at one point felt a little bit too forced.
Well,
maybe a
I don't
little
know. I
disingenuous.
think if you know Susan Estrich, it's less like it's going to be a different experience. But that's her very distinctive voice.
Yeah.
Or a reasonable approximation of it.
But that's a pretty minor quibble that some of their accents may have at times been.
I didn't get that. I felt that Nicole Kidman and Charlize Theron's voices were distinct. As I've said before, Charlize Theron was channeling Megyn Kelly. I mean, that was creepily accurate, the way she did the voice. Gretchen Carlson, I did not immediately know this, but apparently she was a former Miss USA, and she had been Miss Minnesota. And you can catch hints of that Minnesota in the voice that Nicole Kidman is doing. What's interesting is these are all Australians and South Africans. Charlize Theron's from South Africa, and Nicole Kidman and Margot Robbie are from Australia. The film that I saw theatrically immediately before this, a couple days, was Little Women, which of course is a classically American story. And the four Little Women, none of them are Americans. You have two English women, an Irish woman, and Australian.
Yeah.
So it makes you wonder, we have good American actresses, right? Do we have to keep getting these people from Great Britain and the Commonwealth to show up playing these parts? But I mean, they're all great in it. One other thing that really kind of affected me about this and just stressed the weirdness, not just of this movie and the way that it kind of Saturday Night Lives things, the not quite real quality of these famous people playing other famous people that are their contemporaries and that are on TV all the time. But the amorality of Fox News. So there's a scene very early in the film in which Margot Robbie's Kayla, she works behind the scenes coming up with stories, and she's trying to get on screen, which why wouldn't she? And why wouldn't they? I mean, given the way that she looks. And she befriends the character of Jess Carr, played by Kate McKinnon, who is another producer at Fox News, who is a closeted lesbian and Democrat. And there's some degree of debate about which would be worse for her career at Fox News.
Yeah.
And they become friends really quick, and in almost no time, they're sleeping with each other. And this is a woman, Margot Robbie's Kayla, who has been saying, I want to be, I'm an evangelical millennial.
Yeah.
And I want to be the voice of that. You don't have anyone like me on your network. And then extramarital lesbian sex at the drop of a hat. And yet she thinks of herself as the evangelical millennial. And there's this whole sense about the film. One review I read or skimmed about it said that the film is about selling ideas, selling candidates, selling yourself. But what's behind that I mean, what do these people really believe? Even Megyn Kelly, who's kind of the hero of the film, is a very reluctant last-minute hero.
Yeah.
She very much does everything she can not to come out against Roger Ailes until she feels that she can't not do that.
She's biding her time, wanting to ensure a certain amount of success before she's willing to come out and participate. It's pretty obvious that she is in the camp of the women who are coming forward, but she doesn't want to come forward unless she's reasonably certain of success.
Everybody was just biding their time. Nobody was willing to really come out until very late in the process, to where you get to the point where the dam's bursting and there's very little risk left for you at this point. And that's when you take the courageous stance. But even Gretchen Carlson, who is having some difficulty at work. There's a very early scene where she's consulting with some lawyers, and they're coming up with a strategy to sue Roger Ailes rather than Fox News, because it's just going to be a lot easier for a number of reasons. And she's showing these lawyers clips of ways in which she was belittled by her co-hosts on Fox and Friends.
Yeah.
And she continued to work there. She was demoted.
Including one time when she actually walks off set.
She walks off set at one point.
Yeah.
So there was... Fox and Friends has had the two male leads, Steve Ducey.
I don't know.
Steve Ducey and Brian Kilmeade have been the two male hosts of that show since at least the middle 90s. I think maybe going back to 96 when the network launched. And they have a rotating blonde. So they keep, I think Jeanette Hetty was that for a while, a woman named Lori Dew. That lady that was also on The View, that was married to that football player, that conservative lady whose name is escaping me.
Yeah, me too.
She was on there.
I've actually never really watched, I've never watched Fox and Friends. I used to listen to Sean Hannity's radio program, but I never watched his TV program. I've watched very little Fox News in general.
But Gretchen Carlson is promoted to midday, like a 1 o'clock slot, which is not considered a great slot, and has her own show there. And she's willing to tolerate things up until the very last minute. Like up until she'll go along with it until they fire her. I mean, there's that moment where they're showing letters that she wrote to Roger Ailes, kind of being flirty, kind of trying to get a better time slot. I think there was a smiley face on one of them. And up until the moment that option has been cut off for her, that's no longer an option for her, that's when she goes full throttle into this. Of course, she'd been preparing for it. She saw that as a very likely eventuality, because as we learn at the end of the film, she'd been recording a lot of those really damning conversations with Ailes, which come back to pretty much sink his ship. The uniformity of thought at Fox News, the fact that they're kind of dictated to by Ailes, but also kind of by the audience. So there's that clip where Gretchen Carlson is on her show, and she is talking about how she supports gun control. And then she turns to the viewer poll, and it's like 89% against. And the way this network works is you can't be that contrary. I mean...
Though she tries... I mean, she even points out 89% of you disagree with me, but that's not going to change my opinion.
Yeah, it's like, that's why America's great.
Yeah.
There's the scenes where, of course, Megyn Kelly had that very public feud with Donald Trump during the campaign, and there's a scene where she's talking to someone at an airport, and somebody just walks by her. It's like, Trump! And it just really, this film really captured something for me that's very unflattering about the conservative movement today.
It's hard to be honest with yourself and defend the conservative movement at the moment, or at least that's, I think, an opinion you and I both would agree on. As you listen to this, you may disagree with us. That's your right to do.
Yeah.
But there seems to be a serious issue with honesty within the conservative movement right now.
Yeah.
It's highlighted very well by this film.
They talk about how we need Trump. They're pushing Megyn Kelly to be nice because we need him.
For ratings.
And he needs us. I mean, he is taking these phone conversations with Roger Ailes. This is a news network. This is supposed to be a news network, and they're basically coordinating directly with the Trump campaign and are continuing to coordinate directly with Trump.
Well, that's been an issue for a long time. I mean, I don't think it comes as a surprise to anyone that Fox News was coordinating with candidates for public office.
And this is the same crowd that absolutely despises the fake news media for a liberal bias. That's not coordinating in anything approaching this.
Fox News' stance has always been that there's kind of two camps within Fox News. There's the news portion, and then there is the opinion segment. So they can coordinate and assist, but it's all directed by the same person, Roger Ailes. So you can read into that however you want, but they've always tried to distinguish the two. There's the news portions where they will just tell the news. They won't, they're going to report the news they want to report to a certain extent, but they're not going to try and sway things, supposedly in that way. They're going to try and be honest news people. That's their claim. And then there's the opinion segment of it. They've tried to, for a long time, separate those two. To what extent, you can be the judge of that.
I've long said that Sean Hannity likes to think of himself as an opinion leader, but I don't think he is at all. He is an opinion reflector. If you listen to him and Mark Levin and Rush Limbaugh and some of these hosts that were very leery of Donald Trump at first, and then once he started to take off, they're like, well, that's where my audience is. I got to be there too. And so what someone like Sean Hannity does is he takes the biases and the already held opinions, many of them guttural, many of them knee-jerk, of his audience, and creates justifications for those opinions. And
should I insert my favorite quote here?
Okay.
Justification's like masturbation. You're only screwing yourself. So you can justify things all you want, but in the long run, how that will turn out for you is, to be seen.
The Fox News in this film just seems so toxic. It's such a toxic working environment and so amoral. And so many of the people that are big on Fox News really think of Fox News as being their champion, of being this defender of morality and right and wrong, and it just isn't.
Well, it reminds me of that segment that
Trevor Noah.
Did you see the clip he put out on YouTube where they went to a Trump rally? This reminds me in many ways of that clip. I'll have to play it for you later. But they send out a correspondent to go to a bunch of Trump rallies and talk to Trump supporters, in particular about some of the impeachment stuff that's going on and the call with the Ukrainian president. And they'll go and they'll talk to these people, and they're repeating the lines that they hear on Fox News and that they hear from Donald Trump. The correspondent will ask them, well, do you think it's important to listen to the tapes? Well, yeah. We need to read the transcript. We need to understand what's going on. We can't be puppets. We can't be sheep. We can't follow what someone else is telling us. So have you read the transcript? Well, no. But you're sure that, Donald Trump's position on this was correct? Well, yeah. Well, how do you know that? Because Donald Trump told me.
Yeah.
But we shouldn't be sheep. No. And he confronts them many a time with their own statements. And because it's their person saying it, it's okay.
Yeah, there was a similar one that the Jimmy Kimmel show did, a Man on the Street, and they got all sorts of Trump supporters defending things Richard Nixon did in Watergate because they indicated that
Donald
Trump did them. And it's just this knee-jerk thing that's scary. We've talked about this getting to be a little bit more directly about politics than I intended it to be, but one of my thoughts when Donald Trump got elected, we watched the 2016 election together. I was floored that he won. There was always a part of me that was a little uncomfortable. I was waiting for him to completely self-destruct so I didn't have to worry about him anymore. But there's always a part of me that was a little bit worried. But I didn't seriously think that he'd win. And almost nobody did. And a lot of the supporters of Trump that are kind of Saturday or Monday morning quarterbacking it, well, of course it was going to be this way. But no, actually he pulled off a miracle pass at the end. I mean, that he should not have won for any number of reasons. And it's just the fact that he did is extremely unlikely.
Yeah.
So the fact that all these polls and models indicated he wouldn't, it doesn't really say a lot negative about those, I don't think, at least not as crushingly negative as some people say. It's just there is the exception that proves the rule.
Well, there's a scene in this movie that pretty much tells you about all you need to know about the relationship between Fox News and Donald Trump. And it's after Donald Trump is tweeting about Megyn Kelly after she hosts the debate, or is one of the hosts of the debate on Fox News. And she goes to Roger Ailes, and Ailes is like, yeah, this is a problem. We're going to take care of it. And then they just keep putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. And then she finally goes back to Ailes again, and he's like, well, we need Trump and he needs us. And they basically just throw Megyn Kelly under the bus.
Yeah.
And that scene is pretty poignant, and it pretty much tells you all you need to know about the relationship between Donald Trump and Fox News.
But kind of going back to what I started on a little earlier, so when he did win, I figured, okay, so he won. So the conservatives that voted for him, and the conservatives in general, they're going to support him as long as he delivers the kind of policy initiatives they want, nominates the kind of judges they want. But they're always going to feel a little awkward about it because of who this guy is. They're gonna be not ever 100% comfortable with this guy, and I was completely wrong about that because they have pretty close to universally embraced him, even more than they embraced George W. Bush or Ronald Reagan, and he's not at all what they have been saying for decades that they're all about. But disturbingly, he is what a lot of them really were all about, which seems to be a lot of resentment and a lot of we just want to win. We don't care if it's fair, or we don't care if he's attacking people on Twitter, or we hate the fake news, but he can lie on Twitter every day, and we don't care about that at all.
There's a certain element of that. I don't think it's perhaps as broad as you might think, but there are a lot of people who are selling out under the guise of he's enacting the policies we want, even though when you really look at it, he's not enacting the policies they want. I was reading something the other day, something along the lines of I think you posted this, the last decade there's been basically $20 trillion in debt. A certain amount of that goes to Obama, but a lot of it also goes to Donald Trump.
They were screaming about the debt during the Obama administration, and they just don't care.
They've just turned a blind eye to it.
Just all these things that used to be very seemingly foundational to the identity of Republicans and conservatives in this country. They were fiscally responsible. No, we don't care about that. We got to honor our allies. We don't care about that so much. We're about free trade. No, maybe we want some tariffs. We got to have a principled man in the White House. No, maybe he can be a thrice married philanderer. These things that for decades they had been shoving down other people's throats about being absolutely essential were just dropped on a dime. And it's shocking to me, even now, that it's like, if they've shedded this part of their identity so quickly, what is the identity? And that's an issue that I think this film really brings to the front. Your millennial evangelical casual lesbian sex. I'm going to stand on this principle. Maybe I won't stand on this principle. It's not very convenient.
Well, it's a persona.
Yeah, there's an awful lot of persona here, and I don't think anybody in this film really comes off well.
It's hard to disagree with you on that. At least not real people. People who are actually being portrayed, by somebody. What did you think of the Murdoch characters in this? Both Rupert Murdoch and his sons.
And the Murdoch sons. Ted Turner once called Rupert Murdoch the Adolf Hitler of the communications industry.
Wow.
I've got a lot of problems with the Murdochs, but if you have to choose between Roger Ailes and Rupert Murdoch, for me it's no contest. But it was kind of interesting. This was another case of a movie where very early in the credits they list that Malcolm McDowell is in this movie, and then you totally forget. And then he shows up at the very end of the movie as Rupert Murdoch, who has to basically tell Roger Ailes, "You're done."
That conversation in the conference room with the Murdochs and Roger Ailes and Susan Estrich, that was an interesting scene.
And circling around a little bit, there's this moment where Megyn Kelly is listening to the radio, or they're playing this radio over Megyn Kelly coming to Fox News, and it's a clip. I'm all but positive this is an actual clip from the Michael Savage show, because I don't think they'd put it in if it weren't, where he's talking about how Megyn Kelly's nostrils are really starting to flare, and this used to be a beautiful woman, she's getting to look like a pig. since they've started to perceive her as anti-Trump, or
Yeah.
at least asking questions to Donald Trump that Donald Trump would rather not be asked. And this knee-jerk, I'm going to personally attack this person the moment they step a little out of line on this guy. I mean, again, this whole Trump phenomenon, the degrees to which people will sacrifice consistency and integrity for this man, seemingly so willingly and so quickly, just he's so clearly not worth it. And I really think that they are doing some long-term structural damage to their movement. They have no idea because they're just seeing the short term. But this is turning so many people off from conservative philosophy that could potentially be gettable votes. But they're giving up on that. And there's this sense that they're no longer willing to try to convince people. They're just dug in. And because the demographic that the Republican Party and Fox News is appealing to is shrinking, it seems insane. I mean, it seems planned obsolescence. I mean, what's your long-term strategy if you just consolidate a dwindling constituency and alienate everybody else? You're signing your death warrant.
Well, to bring this back around to, I guess, a purely movie discussion, how would you rate this film?
This film, I would probably give 3.5 stars. It's frankly just too strange to get anything above that. It just, there's certain qualities to it that are cartoonish and melodramatic and don't entirely work. But I think at the core of it, I mean, it's saying some really important things, obviously, about sexual harassment, but also about the state of Fox News and the state of the conservative movement. I'd love to talk about this movie with a conservative if I could get a conservative I know to watch it. But yeah, I would not put it on a top 10 list of the year, but I think it is in some ways one of the most important films of the year, and I think in hindsight it will really encapsulate something about this current moment.
I'm kind of curious to see if a few years down the road, if this doesn't take on the cultural significance that might make it into a top 10 list of the year at some point. Mm-hmm. You hope on some level that it might. I don't know whether it will or not. I haven't done my top 10 list of 2019 yet. You like this perhaps a little more than I did. I probably would give it 3 out of 4 stars on the 10-star scale. Probably 8 out of 10 because I think it could be culturally significant. But I'm curious to see if it will end up being culturally significant.
And I don't want to give the impression that being totally political about this, especially about the sexual harassment elements of it. Eventually, somebody should make the Harvey Weinstein story. I mean, that's a story that also needs to be told. This is not just a political thing. This thing happens. Yeah. As we've seen with the Me Too moment, it seemed like for a while that every week the New York Times was dealing a blow to another field, from opera to professional chefs to, everywhere. And all these different fields, this kind of thing is persistent. It seems like Fox News was particularly good at enabling it and a particularly bad breeding ground for this kind of behavior, but it's certainly not something that just happens with conservatives. I mean, Harvey Weinstein was on the surface the most liberal of liberals, and he was an awful human being.
Anything else you want to say about this?
No, I think that's probably all we really have to say about Bombshell.
One thing I'm kind of curious, I haven't decided yet. When I go to post this, I may turn off the comments on YouTube.
Indeed. Assuming we had listeners, this could be the death blow to some of them.
Well, I'm Rob.
And I'm Nate, and this is Rob and Nate Record a Podcast.